The state of Washington's best high school recruit in the 2025 class just got an offer from Few and the Zags. Will Davis Fogle become Gonzaga's first commit?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Happy Tuesday, folks. Recording this very shortly after we saw an unfortunate injury for Jalen Suggs in the Orlando Magic playoff game. I don't know any updates right now, but once we find out if he is going to be missing the rest of the playoffs, we'll get an update later this week on all the Zags in the playoffs, although unfortunately not likely to be a happy update on Jalen Suggs. You hate to see that for a young man who's already battled so many injuries in his career. But we got a jam-packed show. We're talking Few. He's going to be coaching with Team USA this summer in Paris for the Olympic Games. We'll talk about that, what it means for him, what it means for Gonzaga. The Gonzaga women's team lost another player to the transfer portal. We'll talk about that, as well as LMU, which they are building something real special in the transfer portal. Tons of fantastic additions. That hiring of Lorenzo Romar looks like it's going to pay dividends right away for Stan Johnson and the Lions. We'll close out the show with that. But first, back-to-back episodes we're leading talking about recruiting. Gonzaga is active right now on the recruiting trail, looking at players in 24, 25, and 26 recruiting classes. We talked about Sam Funches, the top center in the 2026 class, getting an offer from Gonzaga. We talked recently about Nolan Traore, Gonzaga's top target in 2024. And now today we're going to talk about a player we've talked about quite a few times already here on Locked On Zags. Those of you who are everyday listeners will remember hearing the name Davis Fogle. Those of you who are not everyday listeners, tune in every day. You guys can hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. It's very much appreciated. Davis Fogle is a 6'7" guard from Anacortes, Washington. And again, for very eagle-eyed listeners, or eagle-eared listeners, I guess, Davis Fogle was 6'5". Every other time I've talked about him on this podcast, I've described him as a 6'5" guard from Anacortes, Washington. Reportedly, he has grown. There is a pretty big difference between being a 6'5" combo guard. At the college level, 6'5" is still a very good size to play both guard positions. But you know what's better than 6'5"? 6'7". That is a great time to hit that growth spurt for Mr. Fogle. 6'7" now from Anacortes, Washington. He is not going to continue playing at Anacortes High School. He is set to play at Compass Prep in Arizona. It's one of the premier basketball kind of factory high schools out there. Obviously, we've seen a handful of Zags play at these types of high schools in the past, like Montverde Academy in Florida, Wasatch Academy in Utah, which is where Nolan Hickman came from. Isaiah Harwell, target for the Zags in 25 class, is also from their Compass Prep, is a factory that we've seen a lot of great high school basketball players come out of. Currently, Fogle is a four-star prospect who is ranked 77th in the 2025 recruiting class at the On3 composite rankings. On3 themselves have him all the way up at 57th, where he's 75th at 247 Sports and 62nd at Rivals. Like I said, he is the top-ranked player in the 2025 class from the state of Washington. And it's not surprising to see why, because in his sophomore year at Anacortes High School, granted 2A level, it's not a high-level basketball conference, but still Fogle averaged 25 points per game, just a dominant performance. Very excited to see how he develops and what he looks like at Compass Prep. I think that's going to tell us a lot about whether he is somebody who has put up big numbers in a league that's not very competitive, or whether he can play at that high level or not. So this is a big move for him to go down to Compass Prep and get that opportunity. But he gets this offer from Gonzaga, an offer it seems like he's been waiting for. A handful of other programs have already made him offers. Nebraska is the most notable. It's the only place he has visited officially up to this point. He also has offers from local schools like Washington and Seattle U. Portland has made an offer, LMU, Boise State, Wyoming. We've also seen an offer from LSU. This is all what's reported on On3 and 24/7 Sports. Fogle himself has indicated he has an offer from Creighton. He's also indicated that there is interest from St. Mary's and that he may go down to Moraga for a visit there. But the big thing here is that from what we know, Fogle has seemed interested in going to Gonzaga for a long time. That doesn't mean it hasn't changed. Doesn't mean it's locked in by any stretch of the imagination. But from various reports that I have seen, it sounds like he attended camps in Spokane when he was younger, either middle school or early high school, and has kind of been interested in potentially, who wouldn't? You know, I mean, it's the premier basketball program in the state of Washington. I could totally understand any high school player in Washington envisioning themselves potentially going to Gonzaga and following in the footsteps of, you know, Jalen Suggs's and the Nigel Williams-Goss's, Josh Perkins, Kevin Pangos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of just what we're hearing a little bit about Fogle, is that it sounds like this is a program he has wanted to play for. It took Gonzaga a while to offer him. There's been rumors that they'd connected, that they'd reached out, that there was kind of a back and forth, but they hadn't actually officially extended the offer until now. So it'll be interesting to see if that kind of causes movement on his end. If it was, the best case scenario for Gonzaga is that he was waiting for that offer. Now that he has that offer, he's going to go ahead and commit. Not saying it's going to happen, just saying that's the scenario that would be ideal for Gonzaga, because right now the cupboard is bare. There is nobody committed in the 2024 class, nobody committed in the 25 class, of course, nobody beyond that as well. And that's not for a lack of effort. We know that the 24 class Gonzaga hasn't been super invested in, partly because they don't have a lot of roster space available right now. So they weren't going to go make a bunch of offers to freshmen in the 2024 recruiting class because they didn't have space for multiple players to potentially accept those offers. But 2025, we've seen them be far more active in recruiting. In fact, Fogle now becomes the fourth player in the 2025 recruiting class who has officially received an offer from the Gonzaga Bulldogs. He joins Isaiah Harwell, who I mentioned before, playing at Wasatch Academy in Utah from Pocatello, Idaho. They've also offered Jalen Harrelson, who it sounds like is looking at some other places, but he's a top 20 prospect in that class of 2025. They've also offered Nick Kamenia, who has been on the radar for a very long time, has been at both of the last two Craziness in the Kennel events, a 6'7" small forward from Harvard Westlake High School in the LA area. So the Zags are definitely looking ahead to that 2025 recruiting class, and for good reason. Because Ryan Nembhard will be out the door, because Nolan Hickman will be out the door. They're not going to have a guard rotation after this season until they make some moves. They obviously will make some moves, but Harwell's a guy who could start right away as a freshman. Hard to know if Fogle would be a day one starter. My guess is probably not. Historically, day one freshman starters for Gonzaga have been limited to the very best of the best, the highest regarded recruits. Harwell would fall into that category, but other than that, it's your Jalen Suggses, your Chet Holmgrens, et cetera, et cetera. So I could see Harwell starting. I could see Gonzaga adding a transfer and kind of putting those two guys together, having Fogle be somebody who comes off the bench as a freshman and develops into that system. Again, the fact that he's still growing is an incredible sign. 6'7" player with guard skills. Really nice if Gonzaga could lock that down now and get a commitment and have him stay secure as somebody who comes into this class in 2025. That would be an incredible addition for Mark Few and the Zags. And like we said, it could pair really nicely with Isaiah Harwell, could pair really nicely with Nick Kamenia. We'll see. Gonzaga's probably not going to land everybody they've made an offer in 2025, but they've been the favorite for Isaiah Harwell for a while. They've been the favorite for Nick Kamenia for a while. Like we said, feels like Jalen Harrelson is a bit of a pipe dream, but hey, you never know. And now with Davis Fogle, there's a chance that they become the favorite now that they've made this offer. We'll see. Like you said, he's looking at Moraga. He's apparently has an offer from Creighton. If that's the truth, then that's a very compelling offer to have to consider. Like I said, he's already visited Nebraska. So this isn't like a done deal by any stretch of the imagination, but it wouldn't shock me if now that Gonzaga has offered Davis Fogle, that the next steps are him coming to campus and, you know, getting shown around. And if he's interested and invested, we could have a commitment here fairly soon. Well, folks, Mark Few is going to be on staff for Team USA this summer in Paris for the 2024 Olympic Games. What does it mean for him? What does it mean for the Zags? We're going to talk about that after a word from today's sponsor, Game Time. Folks, the weather is finally heating up, and that means it's time to go take in some baseball games. And great news, Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. And in fact, prices on the Game Time app, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. One of my favorite features is their last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for not only sports events, but concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And I often worry about my tickets being bogus, but with Game Time's ticket coverage, your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the entire ticketing industry. And I love having that peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is also brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, it is playoff time in the NBA as well as the NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers will get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 guaranteed, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Right now, folks, Gonzaga's plus 2,500 odds to win it all in 2025. It's already dropped from plus 3,000. So if you want to capitalize on that potential profit, then what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic W. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Moving away from talking about recruiting to talk about Mark Few's summer, because he is going to be an assistant coach for Team USA as they look to capture a gold medal at the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris, France. Few joins Steve Kerr, who is the head coach, as well as assistant coaches Tyronn Lue and Eric Spoelstra. All four of these coaches worked together last summer. If this sounds familiar, it is familiar because all four of these coaches were together last year for the 2023 FIBA World Cup. Now, it didn't go very well for Team USA last year. They finished 4th. It was a disappointment. The team just didn't play very well, didn't gel all that well. They had some issues on the interior with post defense, things like that. But this year's team, folks, the roster is stacked. They're calling them Redeem Team 2.0. Always got to be a nickname out there somehow, right, for these teams. But hard to not look at this roster and feel pretty encouraged about the odds of winning a gold medal here. Currently, the 12-man roster includes LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum, Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, Bam Adebayo, Devin Booker, Kawhi Leonard, Drew Holiday, Tyrese Halliburton. Stacked, loaded, star-studded class group for the Team USA right now. This is an incredible group. So many combined gold medals, so many combined all-star games, MVP awards, et cetera, et cetera. Just LeBron, Curry, and Durant is enough right at the top there to feel pretty confident about this group's ability to win that gold medal. For Mark Few, he's the only college coach involved, and it's just special. It's a huge badge of honor for Steve Kerr to have trusted Mark Few to be on this staff, for him to get a chance to coach literally the best basketball players on the planet in this situation. It's an honor. It's a privilege. It's a feather in the cap of Mark Few's tremendous future Hall of Fame career for him. And I know some people worry about whether this will impact the job. And he was out last year, with the team and not necessarily spending all of his time in Spokane on the recruiting trail, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the deal. For one thing, Gonzaga's roster is a lot more set right now than it was at this time last year. As I've been saying it on the podcast, I'll continue to say it on the podcast going forward. There are not minutes available right now for Gonzaga. That doesn't mean they won't add somebody if they go find. They've been connected to some pretty prominent transfers. We'll eventually talk more about some of them on the show. Cason Pryor from South Florida is a name we've heard quite a few times. We had been hearing Ian Martinez from Utah State, although he has decided to stay at Utah State. But those are seniors, veteran guys that apparently, if Mark Few and the Zags are contacting them, they have some interest in potentially bringing them to Spokane. But more than likely, a lot of Gonzaga's interest seems to be with younger guys who could maybe be multi-year pieces for Gonzaga going forward. I think that the roster is not finalized. There's probably at least one more addition addition that will happen for this team at some point, whether it's an incoming freshman, whether it's an international player who comes in, whether they do find a transfer who fits their timeline, who fits kind of what they need now and in the future. But for the most part, the biggest addition that needed to happen was a replacement for Anton Watson, and they did that before they even finished the season. They did that when they added Pepperdine's Michael Ajayi. They also get basically a free addition in Steele Venters, who missed all of last year with the knee injury, but he's going to be back. So you have Steele Venters coming back, you have Michael Ajayi coming in, you have everybody else returning. Mark Few doesn't have to have as chaotic and busy of a summer as he's had in the past. Obviously, you still want to be doing recruiting like we talked about with the offer to Fogle and Funches and a handful of other players in 25 and potentially 26, but you have assistant coaches who help do some of that as well. Mark Few doesn't need to do every part of that. So I'm not worried about this at all for Mark Few, for Gonzaga. I think that this is an incredible accomplishment for him. Again, it's an incredible thing to put on your resume. It's an incredible just opportunity. Who wouldn't want to go coach the literal best basketball players on the planet? I think this is incredibly cool for Mark Few, and I think it's a sign of respect for the Gonzaga basketball program, an indication of how far this team has come. I mean, for folks out there who have been Gonzaga fans for more than 15 years, this would sound like somebody speaking a foreign language to talk about this. Yeah, Mark Few's coaching LeBron James, Steph Curry, all these guys for Team USA. Like, it's just another thing that Mark Few is doing these days. Like, he's been involved with Team USA for close to a decade now in various capacities, and to get a chance to go represent his country, represent USA basketball, try to go win a gold medal, it's really cool. I'm really happy for him. I'm excited for him. I'm excited to watch this team and get a chance to see whether Mark Few can help bring home a gold. I think it makes him better as a coach. I think getting to work with guys like Lou and Spoelstra and Kerr is going to make him better as a coach. So I think that if anything, it's going to help Gonzaga. Yeah, you'd like your head coach to be a little bit more around, and I'm sure there are a lot of other coaches who wouldn't take this opportunity because of that. But again, Gonzaga's in a fortunate situation where they can kind of do this because they don't have a bunch of needs on the roster. Like, if John Shire took this job and all of a sudden the entire Duke roster's in the portal, which is the case right now, that might be a little bit more challenging. But it's not the case for Mark Few and the Zags, and I think it's an opportunity well worth taking. And we'll see if any players join him. Obviously, there won't be any Zags on the Team USA roster. Maybe in the future, Chet Holmgren or Jalen Suggs will get that invitation. But for right now, Team USA is Zag free outside of Coach Few. But Kelly Olynyk very likely to represent Team Canada. I think he's going to be their team captain, as a matter of fact. So that's an incredibly cool opportunity for him. Possibly Andrew Nembhard plays with them. I would say Kevin Pangos, but it sounds like he is hurt right now, so I don't think he will get that opportunity, unfortunately. Domantas Sabonis is a near lock to represent Lithuania, so I think you expect that there. I believe Japan is not qualified, so unfortunately Rui Hachimura will not be there, but we should see Sabonis, we should see Olynyk, we might see Andrew Nembhard, and of course we'll see Mark Few. So just the Zags representing themselves, their countries, representing Gonzaga at the Olympic Games is going to be an incredibly cool thing that we get to witness this summer. Wanted to also mention Calli Stokes has entered the transfer portal out of the Gonzaga women's basketball team. Calli reportedly is planning to participate in track and field at her next stop. So she's not actually looking to find a new home in the transfer portal to play basketball, but rather to compete at the track and field, in the track and field events. It was a tough loss for Coach Fortier and the Zags. She played 29 games last year, about 19 minutes a game, about 4 points, 3.5 boards, and 1.3 assists. Her numbers as a sophomore were very, very similar to her numbers as a freshman, about 18, 19 minutes per game, averaging about 4 points, 3.5 boards, pretty much the same between her freshman and her sophomore years. But she was in line for a bigger role. And I think that's why this is a bit of a stinger for the Zags women's team, because the Trunk twins are out the door. We know Brenna Maxwell is out the door. And there was an opportunity for Calli or somebody to step into a starting role in that guard room to be able to help distribute, facilitate the basketball to Yvonne Ejim. And now Calli is not going to be the person stepping into that role. She joins Peyton Muma, who has also entered the transfer portal for Gonzaga. But it's a tough loss for Gonzaga, but we're happy for Calli. We hope we find a place for her. She finds a place that makes her happy, gets an opportunity to compete in the events that she wants to compete in. But for Gonzaga, Claire O'Connor was a freshman last year, played small role, but is very talented and should step into a much bigger role as a sophomore. They have a couple of freshmen coming in who are guards who are expected to step in and potentially play big roles right away. And of course, Coach Fortier now has scholarships to play with, potentially in the transfer portal as well. So I wouldn't say this is a significantly big problem for Coach Fortier and the Zags, but it is unfortunate to see Calli go. Talented player. I think she could have had a really big role as a junior, but hopefully, again, she finds a spot that makes her happy going forward. We're going to stick talking about the transfer portal. We're going to look at the rest of the teams in the WCC because LMU, they picked up a huge commitment from former Pepperdine big man Jevon Porter. We're going to talk about that and a series of moves for Stan Johnson's club and some other stuff going on in the WCC. Coming up after a word from today's sponsor, Monopoly Go. Folks, I've been told I'm a competitive person, and let's be honest, it's true. I have a competitive side, as we all do, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It is a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of different Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or the Google Play Store. All right, folks, closing out the show today, talking about the WCC and some of the transfer portal additions we have seen around the conference. And we're going to start with Stan Johnson and the LMU Lions because they have made some big moves this offseason. Of course, they hired Coach Lorenzo Romar, the former head coach at Pepperdine. He is now the associate head coach at LMU. And we kind of we're waiting for that move to pay off. And it did in a major way with the announcement on Monday that Jevon Porter, who averaged 16 points, 6 boards, 1.5 assists, and 1 block last year for the Waves, has transferred to LMU. This is all WCC caliber player who is now moving to LMU following his coach, Lorenzo Romar. They are very close. We knew that. I think that I can't remember the exact connection. It's a godfather or some very close connection that Porter has with Lorenzo Romar. Everybody assumed Porter was going to go to Missouri, because his older brothers, Michael Porter Jr. and Jonte Porter, both played at Missouri. He's from Columbia. He went to Pepperdine to follow Romar. Everybody assumed, okay, he's going to go back to Missouri. He's going to play for Coach Dennis Gates, go to the SEC. He's good enough to do it, et cetera, et cetera. But instead, he's back in the WCC, and he's going to kill it. This is a huge addition for Stan Johnson and the Lions, and again, really makes that move of hiring Romar pay off in a major way. But this is one of 5 transfers that they have already added at LMU, and they're all some big name additions. The other big one is Myron MJ Amy. MJ Amy's from San Jose State, 6'5" guard, averaged about 16 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, 1.5 steals last year, shot 36% from 3. Anytime you can get yourself a 6'5" guard who averaged 16 points per game in the Mountain West, you're going to feel pretty darn good about that. Yes, San Jose State's not very good, but that's still a big-time addition for LMU. They also get Jan Vide. We talked about him briefly in a previous episode of Locked On Zags. Vide's a 6'6" guard from Spain, spent last year at UCLA. Barely played, 2 points per game in 7 minutes, but he was a highly regarded international prospect. Gonzaga was actually pursuing him as an international addition before he ended up going to UCLA. So this is a potentially kind of an Adama Alpha Ball 2.0 situation. Obviously, Alpha Ball was at Santa Clara, not at LMU, but getting a international transfer who didn't play much at a Pac-12 school to come to the WCC and potentially break out. That's what LMU is hoping with Jan Vide. I think there's a real opportunity that could be the case for this Lions team. They also add Matar Diop from Nebraska, 6'9" big man from Senegal, played at the NBA Academy in Africa, spent 1 year at Nebraska, didn't do much, 19 games, 4 minutes per game, less than a point, less than a rebound per game. But again, 6'9" big who was recruited out of the NBA Academy in Africa to go play for a Big Ten school. Yes, he didn't play much. It's hard to not like that addition, though, if you're Stan Johnson and LMU. So, yes, they've lost Justin Wright. He is in the transfer portal. Michael Graham's in the transfer portal. Dominic Harris is in the transfer portal. So they've lost some guys. But the additions here, this team could be really good next year. I mean, we're talking like if all the pieces fit together the way that they're hoping they do, we're talking second place in the WCC good. I'm not saying I'm predicting that necessarily. I'm just saying that ceiling is absolutely there for this team with the additions that they have made. A couple other things going on in the WCC. St. Mary's makes an addition to stop the bleeding of their program for Randy Bennett. They add a transfer from Arizona, Paulius Muraskis from Lithuania, 6'8", rising sophomore. Didn't play much for Tommy Lloyd's team last year, 5 minutes per game, about 2.5 points, 1.2 boards. But he was 14 of 27 from three. That's 52%. When I use percentages, when I'm talking about guys who didn't play much, I like to try to highlight the actual numbers because it's not a very big sample size, but 14 of 27 is also not tiny. And anytime you can get a 6'8" guy who shot 52% from three, even in that sample size, I think you feel pretty good about it. Does Muraskis fully replace Joshua Jefferson and Aiden Mahaney? Of course not. Of course not. There's still a lot of work to be done in Moraga for Randy Bennett and the Gales to get this team back where they want to be. But to add a 6'8" big who can stretch the floor alongside Mitchell Saxon, who's coming back, alongside Augustus Marcelonis, like, you got to feel pretty good about what you've got, at least as a core right now, if you're Randy Bennett and the Gales. Not as good as you did at the end of the season, certainly, but this is a nice addition for them. Also want to shout out the Portland Pilots. They have stayed very busy. Most of the additions they have made have been recruits, handful of Australian prospects from Australia. They have a big connection there. Tyler Robertson, who is out of eligibility, is from Australia, and I think has helped kind of with that pipeline that Shante Leggins has. They did add a transfer, though, from American out of the Patriot League, Jermaine Balasagar Webb, 7-footer. He did play at Montverde Academy in Florida, so he played at a high-level high school. Last year for American, he averaged about 7.5 points, 3.8 boards, shot 58% on twos. So getting a 7-footer, getting a big man who's played 2 years of Division I college basketball, that's a nice get. That's a nice add for Shante Leggins and the Pilots. But still a lot of work to be done. Basically, the whole team is in the transfer portal recently. That includes star freshman Tyler Harris. He was great. He was great last year for the Pilots. That's a rough loss for them. I don't blame him for entering the portal. He looked like a legit NBA draft prospect at times last year, but still a tough loss for the Pilots. And then Pepperdine, they added a couple of transfers as well in the Ed Schilling era, the new coach replacing Lorenzo Romar in Malibu. They had Aaron Clark from Wake Forest, 6'6" guard. He played just 7 games for Wake Forest as a freshman, but anytime you can get somebody, a bigger guard from a high major program, can't hate that. And they also had Stefan Todorovic from San Francisco, so another WCC defector who stays in the conference. Todorovic began his career at SMU, spent 2 years there before transferring to San Francisco this past season. He's a 6'8" forward, averaged about 4 points, 1.5 boards, and shot about 29% from three last year for the Dons. I suspect that those numbers will go up at Pepperdine. I think he didn't quite fit at San Francisco the way that they had hoped he would, but a talented player who's got 3 years of Division I experience, 6'8" player who can shoot the rock. A nice addition for Pepperdine, even if his numbers last year at San Francisco were not all that great. We're going to have way more updates on the WCC, on the transfer portal for the women's side, for the men's side, all sorts of updates coming your way later this week here on the Locked On Zags podcast. We'll also keep you up to date on those Zags in the NBA playoffs. Like I said, unfortunately, probably not a very positive update coming your way on Jalen Suggs soon. We'll get to that. We'll also continue our season in review series, talking about every player on Gonzaga's roster and getting you ready for the start of the next season. That's going to wrap it up for us today here on Locked On Zags. Thanks so much to those of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. And until Wednesday, as always, go Zags.